Alright, so today is all about Chapter 11, Secure Network Architecture and Components. Specifically, we'll start off just a brief review of the OSI. We'll talk about TCP/IP. Then we'll cover network security, wireless security, and finally, secure network components. Alright, so this may look a little bit familiar to you. Okay, so the OSI is a conceptual model, and what it's designed to do is to provide general standards, not specific standards, but very general standards for how we can exchange information on a network. So, who wants to volunteer to walk me through from physical to application? So, Ben, would you like to explain going from physical to application for us? Okay, I'm sure you'll do fine. It's a physical link there, exactly. So it's the routing process, in other words. Okay. So it's that end-to-end connection. And that doesn't have to be between systems, by the way. Okay, so TCP/IP stack, for instance, you could communicate within a single device. All right, what would that address be? At least in IPv4. Okay, it starts with a 1. You're on a single device communicating IPv4. Not a trick question. 127.0.0.1. All right. And then, of course, application, presentation, and session are on what device? Exactly. So if you're using a computer, this all happens on your computer. All right. If you're using something else, let's say you're using a phone, it all happens on the phone. All right. So again, a review from last semester. Okay, so again, we have the application layer. It's there to have basically the interface that the user interacts with. Okay, we have presentation. Okay, this is where we encrypt and get the data ready to go to application layer and ready to go to session layer. All right, so session, each process on a device has a unique session. All right, and the idea here is that one process isn't going to have information be accessed by another. So it's sort of an encapsulation perspective there. I got the lower layers. Again, we went through these. Not going to go too much into them, but that's the OSI. All right. Of course, we shift over, talk about the TCP/IP. Now, why is TCP/IP important? What does it do for us? So OSI is pretty theoretical, right? Is TCP/IP theoretical? No. It's what we actually use, basically. All right? Forget about the DoD stuff. Just look at what we're doing. We have the specific protocols we're using for process and application. Okay? Host to host, either TCP or UDP. All right? A lot of different memes about TCP and UDP, right? All right, which one's Chad? Okay, exactly right. All right, which one's the virgin? Okay, I didn't make the rules. Okay, internet. All right, this is the actual IP addressing. All right, and then finally, you have the specific transfer standards. So maybe using a 10, 100, 1000 connection. All right, what type of standard is that? Which one of these? 10, 100, 1000. Not a trick question either. Are you guys familiar with 10100 ports, right? So if I said a 10100 port, which of these is that? Okay, so what does the 10, the 100, and the 1000 mean? Okay, so speed, right? How do we express speed? So we're talking megabits per second, okay? So if you have 100 megabits per second as the max speed, the reason you still say 10 is because it still supports the Ethernet standard. All right, does everyone understand that? Okay. So if I say 10100, which standard am I talking about? Exactly. Even the 20-year-old equipment in the lab, not all of it's 20 years old, of course, but the stuff that is, okay, those 3500 switches, they support which of these standards? So fast Ethernet and what else? Ethernet, exactly. Okay, 10, 100, 1000, that's what standard? It's going to be our good friend gigabit. Really self-explanatory, okay? So basically the process and application like we talked about, okay? This is where we're actually getting the data ready to present to the user, okay? So if I told a layer 8 joke, what am I talking about? The user, okay? That would be very rude to do, by the way. So all the different protocols, we have telnet. Again, plain text. Okay, so we're in an information security class now. Probably shouldn't be using telnet. Is that fair to say? So instead, use SSH. All right. File transfer protocol, also unencrypted. All right. You'd use SFTP if you wanted to do something that had encryption. All right. And specifically, the type of encryption is SSH. All right. Wouldn't even bother with trivial transfer protocol. All right. Here's the meme here. All right. You guys remembered it, right? Okay. UDP to Chad. Why do we say that? Okay, it doesn't verify the packet got there. All right, just shoots and scores. All right. Okay, so chat here, the UDP, it's all about speed. Okay. Now, this guy right here doesn't look too confident. All right. And how about you read some of this actually? But you get the idea, right? Okay. So TCP, it's not very cool to have, to double text your girlfriend for acknowledgement. All right, is that a cool thing to do? That's not a cool thing to do. All right. It's kind of shifting gears a little bit, talking about how this can be hijacked. Okay. So when we're talking about session hijacking, there's an established session, which is happening, of course, in the session layer, and in some way, it's going to be hijacked. A couple different ways this can happen. Okay. So you can use session fixation, okay, which is going to disconnect the user and then join as the user. Session sidejacking, where basically what you're doing is you're stealing the session cookie with a packet sniffer. That's a little bit sneaky, okay. And then cross-site scripting. So you guys remember the example Corey did with us? That was a pretty cool example, wasn't it? Okay, that's cross-site scripting. Now, he didn't actually steal the session cookie, did he? Okay, but he could have used malware and stolen a session cookie. Speaking of malware, okay, you have these major types. Okay, spyware is primary purpose is there to steal information from the user. Maybe browsing history. Maybe stealing their webcam access. All right. Virus, of course, is malicious application, just in general. Pretty broad term there. Logic bombs have some condition that upon its completion, Okay, it's going to execute whatever it will. So that can be very beneficial because let's say you combine a logic bomb and a worm. All right, so what you're doing is you're having something that's completely benign for like 30 days. So it spreads throughout an entire corporate network undetected, theoretically. All right, that would be pretty bad, right? Okay, and of course ransomware is the forceful encryption and demanding of a ransom. All right. So we talked about ARP cache poisoning. So basically what we're doing there is we're going into the actual ARP cache, usually on the router. It doesn't have to be on the router though. And we're modifying it. Okay, we're establishing a man in the middle. All right, so instead of having everything go to where it's supposed to, we have it go to us. And that has a lot of benefits for nefarious purposes. Not very many benefits for good purposes. All right, so spoofing, pretty self-explanatory. The idea is that something is appearing one way and is not in fact happening that specific way. So this is particularly a problem for email address spoofing on older protocols. Okay, because is there anything preventing you from changing an email address in older protocols? Not really. Okay, there's no verification happening. So absent verification, we can certainly see that there could be some bad things that may take place. All right, then of course we have brute force. Something that really shouldn't be that big of a concern in 2022. Okay, so lots of technologies available to really not have brute force be an issue on live accounts. Now, having said that, let's say that I had a disk that's whole disk encrypted. Okay, and let's say that I lose it. Then am I concerned with brute force? Probably. Okay, I'm not going to say it's a guarantee, but I'm going to say it's pretty likely that at that stage you'd be concerned with brute force attacks. Okay, because you don't have physical control, you can't necessarily lock them out. Now, depending on how it's encrypted, okay, would it be possible after a certain number of failed attempts to automatically wipe the drive? Depending on the software you're using, yes. All right. What's the downside of that? What if you don't have a backup? What if that was your backup? That's the downside, right? Does it outweigh the cons or the pros? It's not for me to decide. I think in most cases, though, I think having that ability to wipe something after a pretty high number of failed attempts, I think that probably outweighs the negatives in most cases. All right, vulnerabilities. Okay, this is a fun topic because what a vulnerability is something that can be exploited. Okay, so maybe it's a piece of software that has a known vulnerability and we haven't bothered to patch it. All right, so we can exploit that, and if we exploit it, we can do lots of different things. It's going to depend heavily upon the specifics that we're using. So particularly on servers, all right, you want to pay very close attention to not only what processes are running, but you also want to pay attention that there aren't unneeded processes running. Okay, why do you want to do that? Okay, exactly. So if you have a process, and there may be a zero-day exploit with it. There may not, but there may. Okay, that's part of it. Okay, why else? Exactly right, okay? You have a very limited amount of resources on server equipment. All right? Can you overclock server hardware? In some cases, but is that a good idea in most cases? Definitely not. All right. So you want to prevent unnecessary services, not only for security, because there might be vulnerabilities, but more than that, for performance. Exactly right. All right, open ports. Why are those a problem? Or why can those be a problem? So if I leave a port open, what does that mean? Theoretically accessible, at least. Still going to have other protection in place, but if the port's closed off altogether, okay, nothing can get through, theoretically. All right. Unpatched and legacy systems. All right. Should we have legacy systems on a corporate network? Let's debate that. Who says yes? Okay, who says no? Let me change the criteria a little bit. Cost $1 million to replace machinery. We don't have $1 million. Should we have unpatched systems on the network? Who says yes? Okay, who says no? We don't have $1 million. What are we going to do? Okay, how would you mitigate it? Okay, so you're saying you would probably use a VLAN and subnet off what your legacy systems are on. Maybe even disallow inbound communication to that subnet, right? Is that what you're saying? Who agrees? Who disagrees? All right, let's take it a step further. Could you assign firewall policies to prevent known vulnerabilities? Sure. So you got a Windows Server 2003 device. Okay, the vulnerabilities at this point are pretty well known, right? Let's say you have that. Okay. Can you have the network deny known attacks? Easily. Okay. What else could you do? First part of this is air. Air gap. Okay, what does that mean, Ben? Yeah. So, can we breach an air gap? It's possible. Has it happened before? Yeah. Okay, so common way to breach an air gap. Now, obviously, you can't breach it with a network connection. But you have people working on these systems. All right? People don't always act logically. So, stick a little flash drive in the parking lot. Someone comes and plugs it into an air gap system. That happens. It sounds stupid, does it not? Okay? But that certainly happens. So, none of those measures by themselves are enough to say, yes, we can use legacy systems. I would personally argue the combination of them suggests that we can mitigate a lot of that risk, though, especially the firewall. All right, so unencrypted channels. All right, so if you're communicating without encryption, certainly can pretty easily be intercepted, not only by people within the network, but even people outside the network. All right, and then emanation, not as big of a concern right now, but the idea is you have RF devices that are giving hints about what they're transmitting. All right. So I think I used the example in chapter 9. I finally did post that lecture, by the way, of having an old wireless keyboard. And the old wireless keyboards did not use encryption, did they? Okay. So if a wireless keyboard's not using encryption, could that be a pretty bad problem? Yeah. Why? So anyone can receive what you're typing. Okay, do you type passwords? Yeah. That could be a big problem. All right, so some other vulnerabilities. Okay, you have your users. All right, talked about these a lot last semester. So trusted and untrusted users. All right, you have someone on the network. They can accidentally download and install malicious application. Okay, that could give someone access to your network. How do you prevent that? Well, let's back up. Okay, how do you prevent the installation of untrusted applications. That's certainly a good way. And beyond that, taking even a step further, 2 types of lists. Their colors. What are they? Okay, whitelist and blacklist. All right, which one is more safe? Okay, a whitelist. You only allow these specific applications that meet these specific digital signatures. That's going to be more secure than saying we don't allow these applications. Why? Okay, you're certainly going to miss some. All right? You can update every 24 hours. I guarantee you. You know, there's going to be hundreds of malware applications written in that 24-hour window. So packet sniffing. All right, how do we disallow that? Starts with an F. Firewall. All right, so on the firewall, we're going to have the ability that if we detect packet sniffing to drop the connection. Okay? We drop the connection, they're not going to be able to sniff anything, are they? All right, they can sniff localhost. How about that? All right. So DNS poisoning. What's going on there? It's inaccurate DNS records. So if you had a DNS server that had a poisoning attack on it, you tried to go to google.com, it takes you instead to a malicious site. Okay, that could be a very big problem. So of course, how do you prevent DNS poisoning? It's not very easy, is it? All right. The main way is to use a trusted DNS provider. All right. So some examples could be Google DNS. All right, I'm not here to say you should trust Google. Okay, don't get me wrong. But I think that they're probably a lot less likely to have a DNS attack against them than, say, your local ISP. Is that fair to say? What about Cloudflare? Okay, 1.1.1.1. What do y'all think of that? Okay, again, I'm not saying you should trust Cloudflare. Okay, but again, if Cloudflare has issues, is the whole internet not going to have issues? Is that pretty fair to say? I think it's pretty fair to say. All right. So I would advise just sticking to the big providers, and beyond that. All right. Let's talk about wireless threats. Okay. So war driving. Okay, we talked about these last semester, but it's the same threats. Okay. There's going to be some content overlap between these 2 courses. So war driving, okay, you have someone going around, and what are they doing? They're looking for not only open networks, but they're looking for information about wireless networks. So they're compiling a list of locations. They're compiling a list of the security standard. They're compiling a list of any information they can gather about the networks. What about war chalking? Okay, what's war chalking? Okay, where does this term come from? It comes from the Great Depression, right? Okay, you had people, I guess I'll use the term people here, who would go around and they would make notes in, I don't know if I can say this. I'm going to say it anyway. Hobo language, okay? And the idea is that they would share that information to where they would have it sort of be available for people to see. So for instance, maybe train stations, maybe some of them would crack down more than others. All right, does that make sense? So what is war chalking? Exactly right. Okay. So you have a network, you've scanned it using war driving techniques, and you say, hey, we might come back here later. All right, who's played Skyrim? Anyone ever played Skyrim? Okay. You guys ever joined the Thieves Guild? Okay, you guys ever figure out those symbols? What are those symbols? Okay, I don't see any markers. But there's different symbols. I appreciate it. Is it your personal marker? Okay. So one of the symbols looks something like this. Alright? And don't ask me what they mean, okay, because I don't remember. But this is a symbol. It either means it's easy to steal from or it's not easy to steal from. Alright? You got WEP and WPA cracking. Pretty simple explanation here. Alright, what you're doing is you're cracking the wireless key. And there's some applications, especially for WEP, that make it incredibly easy to do. Are we talking about a 40-bit key? You can crack that on a P4 in a matter of seconds, right? Okay, so imagine what you could do with modern, quad and 8-core systems. Why else is WEP not used today? Other than the security. Have a lot of overhead? Yeah. Okay. Beyond that, is it compatible with modern devices? Not always. Alright. So, deauthentication. It's where you would go into an access point and force the authentication of all devices. It's not the biggest threat in the world, but that may be used in combination with like a rogue access point to point people toward a honeypot. Okay, that's certainly possible. So imagine you're happily using a legitimate wireless network. Someone comes along and they set up a wireless network with the same name that has, lots of different problems with it. All right. And they force the authentication along all the devices that are on the wireless network. All right, and then your device may connect to said honeypot, right? Okay. So WPS, I would personally suggest against ever using WPS. All right. Number one, does it even work as well as they claim? No. Okay. You guys know what WPS is, right? Okay. Exactly. So there's a little button on the access point, and it looks something like this. I'm not an artist, but I think it looks something like this. All right. And you press it, and then you press it on your device, and it's supposed to connect you without any hassle. A lot of vulnerabilities with it, and it also doesn't really work reliably anyway. All right. So major wireless threats there. Okay, TKIP. TKIP's old and outdated, but basically this is a WPA standard, not WPA2, and it has compatibilities with devices that only support WEP. Okay, that's why it was used. It's somewhat of a stopgap to address a lot of the flaws in wired equivalency protocol. Okay, so does WEP truly have the security that a wired cable has? Probably not. But at the time, it may have. So again, that's why I got a ridiculously small key size of 48-bit. Alright, it's 48-bit. Is that any good today? So for symmetric encryption, what did I say the book and also many government agencies, what do they define as the minimum? How many bits for symmetric encryption? 128. No. What I suggest using 128-bit key sizes for symmetric encryption. What would I suggest? 256. Alright. Make of that what you will, but in my opinion, 128-bit, it's not necessarily secure enough. Now, is it going to be secure enough against, casual, like, you're not going to be able to crack it on a laptop in a matter of seconds, are you? Okay? But, someone wants in, it's going to be not just double, not just 4 times, it's going to be hundreds of thousands of times longer to crack a 256 than 128. Does that make sense? And honestly, with the built-in hardware through stuff like TPM, and I think Apple has their own stuff. It used to be in the T1 and T2 chips. You guys know what I'm talking about? Okay, now it's built into the modern M processor line. But there's no real noticeable performance degradation going 128 to 256. So why not? All right. So WPA and WPA2 also have the ability to use PSK. It's a pre-shared key. All right. One of the major downsides of it is it's a single key. So this is what type of encryption? If there's a single key, it means with one key to both do what and what. Okay. So that's what type of encryption, Ron? Exactly right. All right. Now, the advantages to that are speed. Okay, but the disadvantage is it's stored on each device using it. All right. So why is that bad for enterprise use? So, like Ron's saying, you have a single key, and you want to make a change to the network. Maybe you fired someone, you don't want them on the network anymore. You gotta go to every single device and update it. Is that gonna be easy? You have 4,000 employees. Better yet, let's make it 100,000. You think someone's getting fired every day? You think someone's getting fired every hour out of 100,000 people? Possibly. All right. Imagine if you had to update your key every hour. You'd go nuts, wouldn't you? Not for enterprise use. Oh, same slide there. Okay. So some different secure network components. This is probably what we're in today. I had some additional stuff if we had time, but not a big deal. We covered it last semester. So firewalls. Firewalls are probably one of the most important things you can have on a network, especially in an IT security class. All right. So, what do firewalls allow us to do? They allow us to filter. They allow us to deny. What else? So when I'm talking about filter, I'm talking about filtering for a lot of different things. Filtering out malware, filtering out explicit content, filtering out, do what? So we'll add ports as a separate thing here. Supports. All right, how about deep packet inspection? All right. So deep packet inspection being we're not just looking at the port and assuming it's going to the right place. We're actually examining each packet and the protocol it's using to ensure that it matches what it says it's using. What else? By the way, that's what type of firewall? Okay, next generation. Now, pretty much any modern firewall from the past 10 or 15 years is going to support deep packet inspection. I didn't come up with a marketing term. All right. What else can we do with a firewall? How about logging? What can we log? Traffic, okay? Inbound, outbound. Who's accessing what? Those are the main tasks we can do with a firewall. Routers and switches. Why do those matter? What's the point of a router? Okay. So why can't we just use a switch? Particularly layer 3 switch. Why can't we just use them? So you can't cross-broadcast domains with any type of switch, okay? You got to have routers for that. All right, endpoint security. It's going to be pretty vital, right? So we have lots of different devices that are being used by our network, okay? We want to ensure that each of them are secure. All right. What does that look like? What sorts of security measures may we have? Okay, so administrative control. That's going to dictate things like updates. That's going to dictate things like installing software. Okay, we want to have some sort of malware protection. But the key here is that this is going to be enterprise malware protection, right? So we're talking about enterprise malware protection. What we're referring to is that it reports back to a central server. Okay, it doesn't have to be a physical server. It could be a cloud-based system, but reports back centrally in some way. All right. What else do we want to do to our endpoints? Physical security. You don't just want someone to be able to walk away with them. What else? How about whole disk encryption? Anything else? Oh, we're out of time. So again, like I say, we're not going to quite finish the slides, but it's okay. It's a review anyway. So see you all Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone.